You're watching Business Nigeria. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is projected that total global trade in 2025 will surpass $35 trillion. The body said global trade expansion is projected to slow in 2026, pressured by softer global economic growth, heightened geopolitical tensions, rising trade-related costs, and continued policy uncertainty affecting cross-border activity. These findings are contained in December 2025 Global Trade Update released by UNCTAD. According to the report, the 2025 projections of $35 trillion represents an increase of about $2.2 trillion, or 7% cut, when compared to the same period in 2024. We're joined by a finance expert, Bola Olojade, to help us understand these geopolitical issues and its impact on economic growth and development. Thank you so much for joining us at this point.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about this now. Can you explain what this is all about? How is this affecting global trade?
Is the geopolitical issues affecting global trade?
Yeah.
Is that the, of course. There are a lot of these geopolitical issues. One major one, for example, are the wars. Everywhere there is a war, there are logistic issues. This morning, for example, part of the news is a situation in which some countries are saying that their people must avoid flying over Tehran or any part of Iran, for that matter. So when you disrupt logistics, you disrupt trade, because that is at the heart of trade. You must be able to move. We've also seen how that has played out in the Caribbean with the U.S. Venezuela issue. But beyond that, it's also the issue of tariff and the uncertainty that the American tariff policy has created generally across the world. Across the world, everywhere, there have been issues of, if you are exporting to America, this is your own tariff. Another country, that is your own tariff. Now, all these things have issues there because we're talking of an increase in tariff. Now, what an increase in tariff will do is to also increase the cost of the item upon which a tariff is being mounted to the final consumer. So the final consumer will need to pay more. Because people have to pay more, they tend to consume less. So that will also have an impact on trade, global trade, generally. Not to now talk of the implication of geopolitics on things like oil, with the Venezuela situation and the uncertainties around the Iran situation. Both Venezuela and Iran are oil-producing countries. And how oil plays out in those two places will affect the oil supply in the world. And with supply being affected, you have prices issues as well. So that also has implication for trade, as it were. So geopolitics is huge, has huge implication for trade, and we are going to see some of it in 2026.
Should we be scared?
Well, should we be scared? I would say scare would not be the right approach. Rather, we have to be cautious and we have to be on top of changes in those geopolitical issues, because sometimes some of these changes could portend some opportunities. So when those opportunities are there, we should be able to cash in on it.
All right.
The messaging alone is something that should prepare us. For example, there are messaging that, look, there might be oil price fall. The price might fall. So if it's going to fall, a country that is dependent largely on oil must be preparing for how it will be able to increase its production to make up for the fall in prices.
Okay, so let's talk about the role of technology and digital services. What role will this play in shaping global trade patterns?
Everything is going digital. technology is the solution provider across literally everything, including things that were historically not seen from a technology perspective. For example, agriculture and some other things. The role that technology is playing in every sphere has become issues of national policy. So you have today, people are talking about the sovereign AI policy. So as a country, you're even supposed to have an AI policy, as it were. So that as the changes are happening, and as AI is becoming more prevalent and predominant in how we live our lives, the country will be prepared to be able to tap into the opportunities that AI represents. Otherwise, such a domain will be left behind. And the consequences are better imagined. If everybody is on a particular level as far as technology is concerned, and you now have a country that is a bit backward, there's going to be a lot of problems. And technology also has implication from security to logistics, literally everything. As I'm talking to you, people can sit in their offices and track all the ships that are about to berth in the Nigerian port or in Nigerian waters as we're speaking. They can tell you the names of those ships. They can tell you what they are carrying, as it were. So technology will continue to be. In fact, the way technology has disrupted the workplace, part of the gains, when people speak about COVID, a lot of the conversation centers around the negative parts of COVID. But in the real sense, there were certain things that happened during COVID that we're never going to go back to those eras again. Yeah. One of it is the way we do our work. A lot of people working from home today, including even in financial services and banking. I was speaking to a young lady recently in one of the banks. She said she comes to the bank 3 times in a week. And all these are about tech. People who are sitting in their rooms and they are working in Europe, America, and Nigeria all at the same time, right from their room where they are seated. And they are delivering, they are getting paid as it were. So technology is the way forward. Digitalization, digital transformation is the way forward to the 2026 and upward kind of economy. And I just hope that Nigeria on its own, I've heard very commendable comments from the minister on the technology side of things, but I hope we will be able to, step it up and be able to execute on those plans that we have. For example, all those fiber optics plans and the rest of them, we must bring them to bear as soon as possible to begin to let these technology things count for us as a country.
All right, so how can developing countries leverage trade opportunities and mitigate the challenges that they might face?
Developing countries, one of the things that developing countries have not done well enough with is in trading amongst themselves. So you take a country like Africa, and a lot of the trade are between Africa and other countries, Africa and Europe, Africa and Asia, Africa and America. So you have situations in which a refinery in Nigeria, let's even go back to when we had no refinery in Nigeria. So most of the fuel importation are done from outside of Africa into Africa. Now that there is a Dangote refinery in Nigeria with such a huge capacity, how much of the African needs for refined product is it able to meet? And what are we doing as Africans to ensure that we can improve on trade-related issues amongst ourselves? Yesterday, I was in a discussion regarding the Nigeria, Morocco, Europe pipeline project, gas pipeline. And one of the issues that came up was the fact that, okay, we're doing this gas pipeline across 13 countries from Nigeria all the way to Morocco. there are countries there that where there are fears around insecurity, for example. So how do you build, how do you invest, how do you even get investors to be interested in putting money down if they are worried that somewhere along the 13 countries where this pipeline will pass through, someone might wake up and cut the pipeline somewhere, So the regional integration via, associations such as is ECOWAS an association, regional bodies like ECOWAS, and other regional bodies have a huge role to play, so that countries can sit down and look at that kind of a project from the perspective of a regional development. And there will be no fear that somebody can wake up one day and go and do something to that multi-billion, it's projected to be a $25 billion project, for example. So Africa must learn to trade more with itself. All those barriers to trade, be it tariff, be it logistic, we must begin to address all those infrastructural needs that will make trade easy within Africa. I used to have a Chinese friend who was covering Nigeria for his company. And what he told me sometimes was that, look, he would rather sit in France to cover Africa. I said, well, you are covering Africa. Why are you sitting in France? He said, because it is possible for him to get to any part of Africa from France than if he sits in any country in Africa. So from France, he can get flights to literally all the countries in Africa. But he cannot sit in Nigeria and be sure that if he needs to get to Botswana or to whatever, that he will be able to get a flight easily. So that is a logistics problem. So it's part of the things that Africa must be able to address. Is there today an African hub for aviation where people like that, my Chinese friend, can sit in that particular country in Africa and have the confidence that if he needs to get to any part of Africa, he will get a flight. So these are some of the issues, tariff issues, infrastructure issues, logistic issues. We must continue to address this to ensure that we can improve on trade. Africa has also,
Yeah, I agree that we must continue to address this to improve on trade. But at what do African leaders really understand the gravity of this crisis?
Well, it's a matter of understanding, because if they don't understand it, then that would be a real calamity. If the beginning of solving a problem is to actually be able to identify that there is a problem. So if they don't, or they can't even understand that there is a problem, then solution will be definitely very far from it. But however, there are indications that they understand that there are indeed problems. Because when you look at the origins of things like the African Trade Agreement, the AFTA, these are some of the discussions that led to that. It's a realization of the fact that, look, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough amongst ourselves. And there are all sort of barriers here and there that are not making this possible. How do we address those barriers and do more trade? These were at the heart of those kind of agreements. But I won't be surprised if today, if we do a proper assessment, that other countries outside of Africa are even benefiting more from the agreement that was meant to be to facilitate trade within Africa. Because Africa has remained largely rudimentary when it comes to what we offer to the world in terms of exports. We have been producers of primary products. So, and that is right about what most part of Africa are offering to the world. So you do cocoa, or you do copper, or crude oil, and all that stuff. And by the time those guys that are buying all these things off you add value to those products, then they export it back to you. You're helping to create a lot of wealth within their own economy, while our own people here are suffering unemployment and all those other things. So the more we get more conscious, the more we are conscious of these restrictions and constraints and are taking steps to address them, the faster it will be for us to get to the destination of
Mr. Olojide, can you hear me? And we seem to be having a network issue there with Mr. Olojide explaining, giving us his own perspective on global trade as we speak about the United Nations Conference and trade. Let's